repertoire by female composers and ethnic minorities. Dear Nethanel, welcome. Microphone is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you so much. Well, I wish that you will play the recording that I sent to you, and then just to avoid any connection issues, if that's okay, and then we can have a little discussion.
Yes, so you prefer to broadcast your video?
Yes, that will be great. Yeah.
Yes. Dear Hassan, can you broadcast his video?
In email, but there is a problem my email now. WhatsApp link, please, or the chat panel, please link. I can.
Okay, I'm going to send you the link on the chat.
Okay, if it's possible.
Yeah, no problem. And here it is.
Okay.
So we have link in chat.
For allowing me to present in this wonderful conference.
Over a decade-long research of original works for viola from the Soviet era, more than 320 compositions have been catalogued and annotated, most of which are unknown today. Among nearly 80 composers listed in the catalog, about half are considered to have an underrepresented background, belonging to an ethnicity or nationality other than Russian, or for being a woman. When investigating why a composer or a musical piece are lesser known, many possible reasons can be in effect, such as domestic and international politics, professional intrigues, as well as historical or theoretical discourses. Yet, the biased discrimination of certain groups within a society remains one of the main factors in the promotion of present and past art. This was likely the case for the three composers to be addressed today that did belong to an underrepresented groups in the USSR: the Ukrainian Alexander Shchetinsky, the Azerbaijani Chaya Mirzazadeh, and the female composer Yelena Firsova. The research on the composers mentioned above is limited, as well as the frequency in which their music is performed or recorded. While Firsova receives more global attention since moving to the UK in 1991, but almost none in Russia, the sources on the other two composers mainly come from musicians of the same nationality, which focus on works from more recent years and less from the composer's Soviet past. The tendency to prefer addressing post-Soviet compositions aligns with the understandable strive for cultural independence of the ex-Soviet republics, still carrying the trauma of the Soviet oppression. As a result, some works remain unperformed and unstudied and can be considered underrepresented for their Soviet background, hence underrepresented twice. Yelena Firsova is known among professional and wider communities as a prominent composer of numerous fine and powerful works in a unique, idiosyncratic, and recognizable musical language. Her output since 1975, considered to be influenced by Edison Denisov, is performed and analyzed more often than her earlier works, despite their musical depth. Firsova's first works with an opus number were composed while she was a composition student at the Moscow College, Училище, already demonstrating her sheer knowledge of musical styles and progressive composition techniques. The Suite for Solo Viola Opus 2 from 1967 is one of those early college works. Firsova provided some useful and inspiring background on the piece, testifying that it was written independently during her first college summer break and performed on campus in the following year. The 10-minute suite consists of 4 traditionally layered short movements, and according to Firsova, the final movement is, quote, a modified reprise of the first movement, end of quote, which gives the work a cyclical shape to some degree. A basic structural analysis of the piece shows that each of the movements is built in a microternary form, with the development of the main ideas at the middle of the movement and a non-exact recapitulation of the opening materials at the last third of each movement. Firsova recalls that back in 1967, her main musical references came from Prokofiev, Shostakovich, and Hindemith, the latter of which can be clearly traced in the rhythmic language, contours, and the overall pace of the suite. The composer reinforced that she, quote, hadn't even heard the names Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern at the time, end quote, a statement that becomes highly relevant once the melodic or harmonic language of the piece is unfolded, giving clear second Viennese school. Firsova attempts to fully use the 12 tones in a phrase before moving to the next one, or to bring a set row of pitches to its maximal diversity, causing the movements to be short, would match Peter Schmelz's definition of non-serial dodecaphony as described in his Soviet serial bullseye diagram, which you can see here. This tendency of a young student, self-reported as uninformed, shows an extraordinarily advanced approach seeking new musical directions to replace the borderline exhausted Soviet post-romanticism. Let us listen to the beginning of the second movement of the piece. This is my home recording, and I think that it's quite clear how this second tier of 12-tone approach is applied here. The combination of Hindemithian gestures with the 12-tone language creates an excessively expressive musical content. Firsova uses different instrumental techniques and timbres, making the viola part diverse, implying a wide range of its possibilities, all within the human voice-like expressivity of the instrument. A great motivation to study and perform Firsova's suite can be drawn from a sense of historical justice concerning her Soviet past as a band composer and as a woman. In 1979, Firsova was banned by Tikhon Khriennikov, which was the head of the Composers Union, along with 6 more unofficial composers, and their avant-garde music was accused to be, quote, meaningless and loud, end quote. While Firsova stated that this ban increased the interest in her and her colleagues' music in the West, Khriennikov's repressive act brought much struggle to this group of composers, a historical narrative that must be told through the performance of their compositions. Currently blossoming domestically, the music of Alexander Shchetinsky is much less studied and acknowledged in the West. He was raised and musically educated in Kharkov, and later active both in his hometown and in Kiev. His main artistic and spiritual supervision after graduation came from Valentin Bibik, and since the 1990s, he won several prizes and awards domestically and internationally, while holding key positions in the Ukrainian contemporary music scene. The Sonata for Viola Solo was composed in 1985 after the composer's graduation from the Kharkov State Institute of the Arts. In recent email correspondence, Shchetinsky revealed that the sonata was inspired by the 1977 solo viola sonata Opus 31 by Bibik. According to the composer, the first 1985 version was significantly revised in 1987 and was recently revised again. Since this article deals with music that was composed in the Soviet era, the 1987 version is the one to be examined. The sonata is divided into 3 movements in a moderate fast-slow layout that was common at the time. As the composer indicates, the first movement comprises a kaleidoscopic of brief, contrasting sections. It is followed by a fast and dramatic scherzo, The final movement is an expressive adagio with extended melodic development of the initial motif that reminds orthodox choral singing. End of quote. The entire piece is centered around a single musical element, the note B and its minor third with D. Despite the diatonic sonority of the minor third, the music is better be seen as atonal with occasional tonal centers. Szczeciński's use of structuralism as a device to convey spiritual ideas, which would be labeled and criticized as formalism a few decades later, might not fully fit into his earlier works. Yet, his viola sonata can be read as a massive set of variations on the micro-motive presented in measures 1 and 2 of the first movement. Let's listen. This is again my recording, and let's listen to this very beginning of the sonata. The composer adds that, quote, changes occur gradually from the inside out without external intervention, end of quote. It shows an uncompromising dedication to a structural concept that is driven by the musical material and gives a minimalistic layer to the composition. In times of a global search for unknown Ukrainian music, as a way to promote and support the Ukrainian culture, violists are encouraged to explore this challenging yet rewarding composition. The gap between domestic and international acknowledgement is even more apparent with Azerbaijani composer Hayam Mirzazadeh. Surprisingly, despite his many documented awards and achievements, there is not even a Grove entry about him, and the only few available English or Russian sources on his life and works are written by Azerbaijani scholars. He received his musical education and later taught in Baku, and composed for various instrumentations and genres. As his music progressed over the years, and especially since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Mirzazadeh deepened his musical search for folklore influences, a process that occupies the majority of writings on his output. Genesis, sonata for viola, was composed in 1983 and was dedicated to and premiered by Rashid Seydzadeh, an acclaimed Azerbaijani violist and faculty at the Baku Conservatory. Faraj Karayev's short review of the first performance highlights the effectiveness and idiosyncrasy of the piece, placing it in a, quote, distinguished position among the national chamber instrumental literature, end of quote. Indeed, and similarly to Szczeciński's sonata, Genesis brings an independent universe of musical rules and hierarchies, unfolded in a set of developments or variations, built upon a micro-element, this time of a single note, justifying its title. Most articles on Mirzazadeh mention his devotion to the artistic preservation of the Azerbaijani mugam in his music. Defined both as an oral improvisatory or composed performance tradition, often set to specific poetry, and as a system of modes applied for singing and playing, Mirzazadeh's main focus is on the latter, as can be spotted in Genesis, even if to a lesser degree compared to his later works. The repetitive textures, often using a bourdon intervals or chords, remind the sonority of the tabs. It is hard to define which particular mugams are used in the sonata, and whether they should be determined by the tonal centers or by observing the enharmony and the specific octave in which some pitches occur. However, the piece brings the improvisatory spirit of the mugam with its definable tonal centers, along with noticeable fingerboard combinations that form the tetrachords from which the different mugams are constructed. In fact, the musical manipulation of establishing a single note and gradually playing around with its neighboring semitones might resemble a pre-mugam explorations on ancient string instruments in an attempt to find the most appropriate location, in parentheses, makom or makam in Semitic languages, on the fingerboard. Thus, with no other given indications, the title of the piece might refer to the primitive, unsystematic, searching nature of the music. One can appreciate the special attention given to the instrumental side of the music, a music about music making, almost autoethnographic, resulted in a composition that beautifully suits the viola. The performance and research of Genesis contribute to the movement of advocacy for historical cultural justice, exposing music by composers of ethnic minority that was underrepresented during the Soviet era and afterwards for being both Azerbaijani and Soviet. When discussing the function of Mugam during Soviet times, Inna Naroditska claims that, quote, within the cultural paradigm, Mugam, considering its cultural role in Azerbaijani music, can be seen as essential in negotiating, preserving, and conveying Azerbaijani musical identity, end of quote. The documentation of such preservation process is crucial for every culture to maintain and celebrate its identity, and even more importantly, to make itself known, spread, and positively exchanged among other cultures. The works of Firsova and Shitinsky fall under Schmelz's definition of unofficial music for their undoubtful tendency to push the limits of tonality and question traditional forms and mannerisms. Mirzazadeh's concept of form, rhythm, and notation are also quite advanced, and the way in which he employs folklore elements is notably more progressive and authentic than the socialist realistic template of narodnost, as can be seen in the music of Soviet Caucasian composers from the decades of Stalin. The transmission of the fascinating academic discourse on music and musicians under the Soviet regime into an audible musical output that reaches the ears and hearts of many can create a circulation that celebrates the much-needed research of the humanities. Besides being a bridge between academia and stage, with valuable contribution to equality, artistic research of this kind makes music more accessible to other musicians and listeners. The findings in this article call for further research into the composers mentioned above, their life, their music, and their artistic circles. Such research must be embodied in both written and artistic results to ensure the acknowledgement this forgotten music deserves, compensating for decades of underrepresentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Nethanel, for this thought-provoking presentation and very interesting material. So first, I want to ask audience about questions. Any questions from audience online? I don't see hands yet, but if not, I have some questions. By the way, I was thinking about my question is about why viola? And my first question, why viola? And then I will ask another question.
Well, thank you so much for your feedback. And why viola? That's a very simple question to answer because that's the instrument that I play. I'm a violist,
okay.
and I gained my doctorate at the University of Miami in performance and research. So that viola is always my starting point, and
okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So, and are you planning to investigate other instruments and broadly, for example, female composers' music that were forbidden in Soviet times? Are you planning?
Yes, absolutely. With all of these composers, I'm hoping to research more music, whether instrumental or not instrumental. I do find that this instrumental music, non-symphonic instrumental music, is the genre to be the least attended in research. Research in general is usually around vocal music, opera, or symphonies, sometimes chamber music like string quartets. And there is much less research on, how should I call it, regular, or just smaller ensembles or solo instrumental pieces. But I will definitely be interested in researching more. This is something that I've been doing with other composers since I've graduated, and I've started this whole investigation into their entire output.
Oh, very interesting. Now, as I was thinking about, yes, we have less literature about female composers, especially in Soviet times. It's impossible. I want to recommend you, and I will send you one link about Georgian female composers, sorry. This is new project of Ministry of Culture and Education, so our new project. And it seems that we have more than 70 women composers in Georgia. It seems we had. And when I was studying at conservatoire in Soviet times, by the way, so it was transitional period from Soviet times to modern time, 90s. We started zero female composer. No one was in program included. No women was included in our program, study program. The only composer we knew from our childhood, it was Mary Davitashvili, because she was author of children's songs and
Right.
animation, music in animation. That's why we knew her. But it seemed that we had too many composers. Some of them died not in Georgia. Some of them were in Moscow, and too many scores are explored. We explored now, but too many scores are evaporated in the air. We don't know how to find them. But in spite of this, the group of Georgian musicians started to make this website of Georgian composers, and you can find their very interesting short scores, including instrumental music, including for instruments. I'm not sure if we have a viola repertoire. I don't remember, but I will send you this link. And imagine our first composer in ballet, Tamar Vakhvakhishvili. She wrote too many modern ballads in Georgia, but we cannot find scores yet. So it's very important thing you are doing, and I wish you all the best in your investigation. It's a new field, by the way, new field. So I wish you all the best, and I was thinking about to start the same in Georgia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm looking forward to receive this link. It sounds like a very
Yes.
interesting project.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. You can find pictures. It's on both languages, Georgian and English, and you can find scores, some recordings that survived. So great material. Of course, we have contemporary composers. They are not forbidden.
Right.
But during Soviet times, we knew only one or two composers. So thank you very much.